Welcome back here to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are looking at the 8th place nation in our nation rankings for 2nd edition, as well as how they've moved over so far in 3rd edition. And today we are joined by Finland. Now, Finland is an interesting nation for us to study because they got some interesting quirks. They've got some very useful little tricks. On the whole, this is a very flavorful, very thematic army. And while in a book with a lot of armies that have very copy-paste, a lot of nations that just get Axis support or a similar special rule that was present in the armies of France in the Allies book, Finland is basically just its own little thing, for lack of a better term. You would almost think that this was its own separate army book, much like the Axis and Allies 5 nations that all got their own. And yet, here we are with a very interesting army that unsurprisingly finishes in the top 10. So when we look at the special rules, there are 3 on paper that they end up getting, but there's kind of a 4th secret special rule as well, which we pointed out before is true of other nations, and this one is one of them. The first is Sisu, and Sisu says that basically when an infantry or artillery unit is reduced to 50% or less of its starting strength, so not its maximum strength, but its starting strength that you purchase it at when you field the unit, then it will immediately uprate to the next highest veterancy level. So an inexperienced unit, which doesn't appear here, but the point being, if you could take an inexperienced unit, it would go from inexperienced to regular with a higher morale and a higher difficulty to wound. In the event that it's moving from regular to veteran, far more likely, then it would end up being now on a morale of 10 with a 5+ to wound. And if it's a veteran, because it obviously can't uprate yet again, it simply increases its morale value to 11. It does not increase its wounding difficulty to a 6+. Okay. This is a very useful ability as long as you are not being wrecked in one single round, right? So, it doesn't mean you don't have to worry about, not going down against a big HE shell or, not going down against a hail of machine gun shots or things like that. You get the idea. If it could just remove the entire unit before you hit that beautiful 50% mark, there's that. The other thing to consider, of course, is while you might uprate if you're down to only 1 or 2 men, that may not necessarily be all that useful, right? Because, you're more likely to pass your morale tests and your order tests, but you're not actually likely to do much for the rest of the game. So that's just one thing to think about. And because of that, I think this is an excellent special rule. It is very useful. It has a way of kind of helping you to stick around when the going's getting really tough. But at the same time, it's not completely overpowered. And I love that. The second one is arguably the reason why a lot of people play Finland. It's really part and parcel to the whole army theme and flavor. And a lot of the units have it hard-baked so they can better take advantage of this. And that is Trained Huntsmen. And the Trained Huntsman special rule says that when a unit is on ambush, it gets 2 abilities, one of which a lot of people tend to forget. The first is that you can re-roll all morale checks, which is fantastic, as long as you're already on ambush. Now, this means, of course, that since you'd have to be on ambush, you don't get to re-roll an order test in order to go on ambush, right? So, so there's that. And the only other action you'd be able to take when you're on ambush is a down order, which you pass automatically, right? You don't have to ever make an order test for that. So in that sense, I suppose it doesn't actually apply to order tests only because there is no order that you would take where the situation would be the case. However, being able to reroll all of your failed morale tests is fantastic because if you're already sitting on regular to veteran and possibly veteran to super veteran for all of your guys, that's very, very handy, right? To be able to get a reroll on whatever it should be. The second special rule, and why I think a lot of people really enjoy playing Finns, is that when you're on ambush, your rifles, not your light machine guns, not your submachine guns, but your rifles, get a +1 to hit. And they did clarify in the special rule that rifles includes a sniper rifle. So we're going to be talking about that more when we get to the snipers. But just suffice it to say for now, it means that especially in 2nd edition, though this also carried over to 3rd, you are much more likely to hit and far less likely to end up on 6s by 6s, which is fantastic. And then the final rule is Matti. And Matti kind of, it represents this, where Sisu is more of like the fighting spirit, for lack of a better term, of the Finnish people. And the Trained Huntsman is more about their skill and marksmanship, even from a young age when it comes to using rifles. And the fact that they required everybody to go through a little bit of armed training. So that way, even when they were levying conscripts for the fighting, they did actually have formal training. You end up with Mahdi, and Mahdi kind of reflects the fact that they're fighting in their own way, their own strategic advantage, the knowing of the land and territory. And so because of this, you get to ignore the -1 to arrive when outflanking. And that is a situationally very useful benefit. If you're the kind of person who likes outflanking, it's fantastic. If you have a unit that does really well outflanking, which the Finns do, that is also fantastic. But not everything works well with Mahdi for a lot of reasons, which we'll be talking about as we get to the units below. But at least just having the option is really nice. We love that. Again, it's a mobility sort of thing. And this follows kind of my general rule of 3 when it comes to the Army special rules. One of them should be more resilience and defense minded, Sisu. One of them should be more offense minded, trained huntsman. And one should be more mobility minded, which is Mahdi. And so because of that, this is a really good set of special rules. Arguably the best we've seen so far in the rankings. And then as a secret special rule, they technically have a 4th one, which is, for lack of a better term, professional army, aka you don't get access to any inexperienced units whatsoever. Which, on the one hand, is kind of nice because it means that your morale is going to be better on everything. And as regards your fighting troops, no -1 to hit, which is rather nice. The problem, of course, is that at the same time, you don't get any experienced units. So you can't save points on your officers. You can't save points on some of those, indirect fire only assets like mortars. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but I could definitely see some advantages in having that option. So in that sense, not necessarily horrible, but it is going to affect some of the rankings as we go down below. So as we look at the headquarters options, we start off with officers being slightly below average because you cannot save points on officers, right? Sometimes it would be very nice to be able to pay 35 points for a second lieutenant instead of 50. Your forward observers are great. You don't get access to an air observer. You just get the artillery observer. I don't know that you necessarily need to take one, but it is nice that you have access to one that is pretty decent. It'll perform decently well. Your medics are great. You get access to both regular and veteran medics. Fun story, a lot of Finnish troops, a sizable percentage of Finnish troops were actually trained in field medical work. And I imagine that's probably because with fighting being spread out across dense forests and stuff like that, you are not guaranteed to have enough time to get back to medical. And so they actually had quite a few people dropped into their ranks who had medical training. More on that when we get to some of the infantry sections below. But the result is I'm glad that they do have wide access to medics and can save some points on one if they want to take one. No specialized officers, and so because of that, as we go into infantry, as we mentioned before, there aren't any inexperienced infantry, so in that sense, there's just no score. You can't save points, you can't go cheap in order to take other stuff. It's fine, but that is a thing to consider. Your regulars are great. I recommend both the Winter War and the Continuation War troops. They're basically the same, except the Continuation War, because of the timeline, can take Panzerfaust, which is quite nice, especially in 2nd edition when they were only 5.1 shot items. So in that sense, if you don't have a restriction on era as to when you can play, and you can choose units from as early as the 1930s with the Winter War and going into 1945, I would probably just take Continuation War Infantry. They're exactly the same in terms of their abilities. And the nice thing about both of them is you can pay 1 point each for tough fighters. So even though these are regulars, they can be very, very, very dicey and very spicy in close combat, which is really nice. And it really does dissuade people from trying to come at you and not getting too close, which, for guys who primarily rely on rifles is really nice because you don't really need to get it all that close. As you look at veterans, honestly, they're fantastic. I mean, you can take Continuation War veterans, excellent, which means you can get some veterans, all with tough fighters for only 1 extra point. You don't have to pay for submachine guns. You can slap some Panzerfaust on there. You can put them on ambush on a given turn to both take advantage of the Panzerfaust if you're getting in close, but also to take advantage of your rifles. They're really good, actually. You also have the Sissy Recon Squads. This is the one everybody writes home about because they have a rule, Master of the Hunt, which allows them, when they perform an advance action, to, instead of firing, they can end their turn in ambush. So you can get a 6-inch move and then still go into ambush, which is awesome because not only does it mean you get a chance to fire, it means you get your +1 to hit. It means you get reroll morale checks in case somebody comes out of nowhere, hits you with a shot you didn't expect to hit. Lucky dice getting a 6 or even a 6x6, and then a big explosion goes off and you lose a bunch of dudes. Probably not going to happen, but at least it's nice to have. And of course, if you do get shot at and you are a little worried about it, because it's an ambush order, you can still go down. So you're able to do a very effective skirmish build if you're building around sissy recon squads, because you can get forward motion while potentially even still going down every turn in order to stay safe. So it is quite survivable. It's quite durable and can still maneuver toward far-flung objectives as needed, admittedly at a 6-inch pace. And then you have the Jakari infantry. These are fine. They're veterans. They're pretty useful. You can give every single man a submachine gun, which is really nice. And that's the big difference between them and the Sissy Recon Squad. They don't get the Master of the Hunt special rule. But they're mostly designed, I think, in case you want to be able to play up close, personal, right up there next to the enemy with tons of shots with submachine guns. I think that's fine. There are definitely some armies that enjoy doing that. The problem is because you're passing up that +1 to hit from trained huntsmen, I'm just not sure the investment is actually all that great, because you're passing up rifles, and rifles are kind of what Finland lives on. At the same time, they don't have Master of the Hunt, so it's not like you can't advance into ambush. So, 6 and 1 if doesn't have another. I think it's still fine. If you want to run them, you certainly can. I've seen them work at a tournament before, though it wasn't me playing them. I would personally probably stick with just continuation war and sissy recon squads, honestly, as my entire army. But if you really want to go a little bit crazy, you also get access to the Calcapartio Recon Squad. And this is arguably the best outflankers in the game. Not only do you not get the -1 penalty to outflank because you've got Monty, but in addition to that, they have a special rule that allows them to arrive from any board edge. You don't have to just pick the one, including your opponent's back line. This was Fog of War before Fog of War, right? There was nothing you could do to stop this. It wasn't like the scenarios like Surrounded and stuff like that where people could be coming in from any side. Instead, this is a classic case of, no, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you're not one of the one nation in 2nd edition, Bulgaria, that could keep people from outflanking. Then you got to plan on having people watching your back against these guys. In addition to that, they have fanatics, so they're not going to run away. You can't easily panic them off. They're immune to flamethrowers unless you get them down to one guy, at least in terms of the morale test side of things, which is awesome. They also are always treated as having a medic in the squad because these guys had extensive medical training. They made sure to have people just in case to patch you up, which is fantastic. They start with anti-tank grenades as well, so you can use these guys in a terror ball to, suddenly come on and potentially wipe out enemy armor. If you're outflanking from a side, all they have to do is move their armor to the center, and they can pretty much avoid that, but it's nice to have the option. And if people are using those long-range self-propelled guns with the big howitzers and such, which were very powerful in 2nd edition, then you might even be able to, run in, do some shooting at some other people, or put a pin on the tank, and then the next turn, run up to the gun and throw some grenades in it. All kinds of options here. I probably wouldn't take them myself. I just feel like they're a little too expensive for my taste. But hypothetically, one could take them, and at the very least, you're going to cause your opponent to play the game very differently. When looking at team weapons, honestly, it's a mix. So your machine gun teams are fine. You get access to the 30 caliber medium machine gun. I think it's the Maxim that was also used by the Soviet Union. It's fine. It's a machine gun team. It's not particularly great in 2nd edition, but it's like everybody else has, so we'll give it an average. Your mortar teams are great. You get access to all 3 styles of mortars. Your anti-tank teams are actually pretty good. You can save a lot of points by taking an AT rifle. You can spend more points to get a Panzerschreck. So whether you want cheaper order dice, higher chance of actually removing enemy armor, you get options for both, which is cool. Your sniper teams are excellent. Not just average, not even just good. These guys are fantastically good. Not only do you get access to a sniper rifle, which is already a really useful tool, as long as you're on ambush and you're shooting at somebody, you're looking at 3s to hit becomes 2s to hit, 3s to hit if you have a pin, which is phenomenally good. That is the best sniper team you're going to get in the game, honestly. Maybe with only one exception. There's only one other sniper that I rated at excellent. And then we've got flamethrower teams. These things are average, but you do get access to them, which is really nice. Could be a great outflanking unit, especially if you put it in a relatively cheap vehicle. More on relatively cheap vehicles in a little bit. And then you've got your special team weapons. None of those particularly present here, but that's fine. Honestly, This is a really good set, one of the best sets we've seen so far. For artillery, your howitzers are pretty great, actually. You can take light howitzers, you can take a spotter on them. You can also take medium and heavy howitzers, but you can't take any of these inexperienced. Which, on the one hand, some people really like taking howitzers inexperienced because they plan to just fire indirect all day long. On the other hand, I mean, you're paying more points than a mortar so that you can fire direct. And I just feel a little bit like maybe because of that, you're not going to miss your inexperienced units all that much. So I think it's fine. It's pretty good. And the fact that your light howitzer gets access to a spotter is really nice. This is extremely rare. It's like, the United Kingdom, Britain, I think China and Finland. It's a very small club. Oh, and Australia, which we talked about last week. But it's a super small club that gets access to spotters on light howitzers. And so, pretty solid. Your anti-tank guns are actually pretty bad. You get access to light, medium, and heavy AT guns. I think the heavy AT gun is a trap. It's way too many points. It's way too easily headhunted by a mortar or an artillery piece. It's very easy to work around, especially in second edition, where you're probably only going up against 2 armored vehicles, maybe 3 if they have an armored transport. And so I think just the value that you're putting into it is probably just not worth it for the end goal. However, your light AT gun, on the other hand, has access to the M42 improved ballistic shell, which allows it's still it's not like the Panzerbusch. The Panzerbusch, it starts at a pen +4 at your standard range, goes up to pen +6 when you're within like 12 inches of it. But it goes down to pen +2 at long range, which is a pretty substantial drop because that's like AT rifle levels. I expected it to go down to like +3 for like a low velocity AT gun, but it didn't. It goes all the way down to a +2. This one just simply says you are pen +4 still. Pen +3 obviously at long range. Actually, now I think about it, that's probably why it went down to +2 is because you're already at +3 because you're at long range, so it goes down to +2. It goes down one additional one. But not only are you pen +4 and then pen +3 at your long range, you still go up to pen +6 when you are at a closer range of like 12 inches away, which is really nice. It's pretty useful actually. So hey, I think if you're looking at taking an anti-tank gun, it could be worth taking. I'd probably go for something like a howitzer instead. Personally, I think you're going to get more value out of it. And then similarly, I think you should seriously consider going for an anti-aircraft gun. These things are fantastic. You get access to 2. You get access to a light anti-aircraft gun. You get access to a heavier version of the same anti-aircraft gun. But the light AT gun, though it's only 50 points regular like every other light AA gun in the game, it also has a gun shield. So while this is technically a 5-point upgrade, your light AA gun gets a gun shield for free, which is kind of awesome, actually. So maybe consider taking that because you're getting some free value out of it. I think it could be pretty useful. You don't get any multiple rocket launchers, so skip past that. As we go into armor, things are actually pretty good, all things considered. You get, the Vickers, E 6-ton, you get the T26, you get the T28. All of these are machine gun heavy sort of stuff. You can also take a version of, I think it's the BT5 or the BT7, that's like a light AT gun, with a coaxial machine gun. So, one of those early war light tank sort of builds. But of course, these are also kind of being balanced out by veteran unreliable traps, right? You're getting these unreliable veteran vehicles, which on the one hand means you might be able to escape taking pins just by virtue of the fact that a lot of these are damage value 10. On the other hand, if they do pins to you, they're going to be doing a lot of pins to you. They're doing an extra one every single time, which means you might only need to get hit 3 or 4 times in order for people to just cause the crew to panic. And you probably only need to get hit once or twice in order to be made to rally every single turn, which is not how you want to be spending 300 plus points. So, I think you have some good solid options here. I'd probably go for something more like the Vickers E6 or the T26 or probably the T28 Pastawana, honestly. Just go with something with a ton of machine guns. Maybe, it has a heavy weapon on it, but we're really just going for infantry suppression. Because if you're gonna go for your armor slot doing damage to actual vehicles, you should go with a tank destroyer or a self-propelled gun. And both of these are really good. You get access to the Stug 3. The Stug doesn't have a turret like a lot of tanks do. However, it has a lower profile, which means it is easier to take advantage of cover, which is always really nice. Has a heavy AT gun, which is really sweet for removing stuff. And if you maneuver it really well, you actually don't really miss the turret all that much. So because of that, I think it's great. Alternatively, you could take the BT-42. The BT-42 is just a medium howitzer in a fully buttoned up damage value 8 chassis. It is reliable, it's durable, it'll do the job every single time. I have used the BT-42 when I've played with Finland, and I really enjoyed it because it's a good, solid suppression weapon, kind of playing around with that maneuver warfare strategy that you have. No anti-aircraft platforms or special vehicles, so there's that. And with no tankettes, asterisk, I'm not gonna lie because we're gonna come back to something. They have kind of like a little tankette. It's still coming up in the transport section, but as regards this section for armored cars and tankettes, honestly, it's really bad. You get the BA-10 and the BA-20. I mean, these are armored cars that have light machine guns instead of medium machine guns, which means a lot less in second edition, but still, it is less shots. One of them has a light AT gun along with it, but these are again unreliable. They're damage value 7, so they're very easy to pin. I just don't like them. I'm not a fan. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me in the comments below if I'm wrong. I think if I'm playing Finland, the 100 or so points I could spend on a decent armored car in this spot that's unreliable, I think I just buy another sissy recon squad. Honestly, I think it'll do more. I think it'll last longer. I think it's just a better option. Okay, but tell me if I'm wrong down below. And then when we go to the tows and transport sections, our soft transports are fine because we get all the common ones that everybody gets, and those are good. We get the armored carriers. We get the T20 Comsum Let's, which is fantastic. Normally, it's typically around 60 points regular, and we get it for 35 points because it's unreliable. And you know, I've been knocking things down for being unreliable above, and that's true because if you're going to spend 100 to 400 points on something and it's adding an extra pin every time that it would be pinned, that's a problem. If you're spending 35 points on one of these things, not nearly as much of a problem, my humble opinion. Take 3 or 4 of them, 5, 6 of them, however many you want, and suddenly, boom, you've got yourself, for a relatively low amount of points, a whole bunch of light machine guns on an admittedly open-topped, damage value 7 vehicle, which means sure they can try to pin it, but then after a while you start to rally, and all you're doing is you're just soaking damage, right? You're soaking shots against you that could be going against your sissy recon squads, or against your continuation war squads, or against your BT-42, or your Stug 3, or whatever. That's where you want them shooting at. So in my opinion, I think unreliable in this case actually becomes a benefit. Not only is it 25 points off, but in addition, it's encouraging opponents to say, oh, like we can get rid of this thing. We can actually get rid of this thing. All we got to do is concentrate a lot of fire at it. And that's exactly the way you want them to be thinking, my opinion. Your gun transports are great because you get access to the Comsumlets and the truck, both of which are fantastic. Just depends on the size of unit that you want to transport in it, if you want to transport anything at all. And then your tows are average to good. There's, you know, they get access to all of the tows that we normally get. They get access to horse-drawn limber, so they were going to get a good rating here somewhere. But in addition, they also get access to a 35-point armored tractor, which is really cheap for a damage value 7 vehicle that is fully buttoned up, which is great. And what this means, practically speaking, and the reason why you would consider doing this, because by the way, in general, tows are not something you want to actually be towing with. You want your guns to be able to come on nice and easy. And you really don't want them moving around because of just the rules for limbering and unlimbering them. And so because of that, excuse me. Oh. I am so sorry, by the way, about this one. I'm yawning all over the place because it has been a day. But show must go on. But the big reason why I point out the armored tractor here is for 35 points, you can get a fully buttoned up armored vehicle. Same cost as the T20 Comsum Let's. It doesn't have a light machine gun on it. But what that means is you have mobile heavy cover for your, you know, maneuver warfare veteran squads that cannot be pinned by small arms, which means you can consistently keep it moving up. And in second edition, because of the, 0 to 1 on everything that has a heavy weapon, unless you've got a squad-based heavy weapon, the amount of actual heavy weapons they will have available to fire at this toe is actually relatively small. And so because of that, pretty useful. And so what are your best choices? Honestly, you got a variety of infantry. I'm not a big fan of the Jakaris myself, but other people are. So hey, fair play. Do what you want. But on the whole, you can do a lot of different styles of play here. And they're all very well executed. You can keep it simple with continuation war infantry or winter war infantry. You can go with guys who can really outflank really well. You can go with sissy recon squads for maneuvering into ambush. You can go for Jakaris for fighting up close and personal. You got a lot of options, which is really great. And all of the infantry choices fill a role. None of them fill a role particularly well as regards cheap infantry. The closest you get is 50 points. But on the whole, it works out. This is really good. You've got a variety of team weapons that are really good options. Mortars, of course, are really great. The fact you get access to mediums and heavies are fantastic. Your sniper teams are some of the best in the game. You got flamethrowers for an outflanking threat. You've got AT rifle teams that you can use if you really want to, just to put some pins down range and maybe do some removal against an infantry squad. You've got howitzers and AA guns that are really good, maybe even a light AT gun that's okay. You've got reliable tanks, admittedly, alongside a bunch of unreliable options, but you do have reliable tanks that you can rely on. And you get the comms and let spam. Like, this is fantastic. It's a fantastic set of choices. And so unsurprising that it makes the top 10. Has a couple gaps in its inventory, but not too many. And so what would I run? I would run something kind of like this. I'd do a, second lieutenant with an extra dude regular, take them with rifles, don't put submachine guns on them, so that way you can take advantage of putting them on ambush. We'll take 3 7-man sissy recon squads. I've run them as small as 6. I've run them as high as 8. 7, I think, is a nice middle ground. It does mean it takes you a little longer to get that up rate to super veterans, but honestly, at a point, I didn't want to spend more points on each of those squads, and I was like, you know what? If I'm getting to super veterans, that's really just to keep them on the table at that point, to make sure that they don't leave. And then we've got 2 7-man continuation war infantry squads at regular, each of which has 2 Panzerfausts and 7 rifles. Nice and easy. Good ambush squad, good way to be able to push up to fight against the enemy. We got our boys anti-tank rifle team. We got a sniper team, purchase regular because I'm going to save some points. We got the medium mortar with the spotter because I want to save some points. I would have taken the heavy mortar, but I needed it for other stuff down below. And a flamethrower team to kind of round out that 4-squad set of support teams. And then I went with the regular light autocannon AA gun because it had a free gun shield. So we're going to take that. It's good value. And then we took the T-28 Postuana medium tank. So 4 machine guns and a heavy weapon. Pretty solid. It's a good solid attack vehicle, which is excellent. I took the mule team as an inexperienced tow for the light AA gun because 4 points. You can, in this setup, actually take it veteran. So, technically you can because we have 2 points left over, and that's the only 2 points we can put anywhere. I just didn't feel good taking a veteran mule team. I don't know. Something about it just didn't feel quite right. So I just left the 2 points, but obviously you could do something like that if you wanted to. And then we've got 3 T-20 Consumlets tractors. And these are regular. It's also worth noting, by the way, as far as I can tell, the mule team, according to the book that granted mule teams to everybody, says you can take an inexperienced. I don't know how that technically works because of the fact that we don't see any other inexperienced units for the Finns. So maybe this is like the one place you can take them. I don't know. But anyway, as you can see, 16 order dice. It's not horrible. You got a lot of shots here. You got 3 light machine guns coming from the tractors. One of the tractors, I would probably just put the flamethrower team in and I would just outflank those. Heck, maybe throw the lieutenant in there with them. Just make sure they come on, and then you can keep the lieutenant inside just to keep the Comsomlets from running. And then the flamethrower team's free to go about its business and do stuff messing around in the backfield. And then on that, just, use everything else pretty much just for supporting fire. Just start throwing pins down range, start removing units slowly and steadily, and then finish up with some outflankers. It could work pretty well. So what have we seen from 3rd edition so far? So first of all, Unreliable has been toned down. This was a relatively recent errata change that came to the Minor Nations ones where we've seen that really it looks like Unreliable, instead of being a flat 25 points, has just become a minus around 15-20% or something like that. And so the result is that unreliable things like comes and lets cost more, which is healthy, and unreliable big veteran vehicles cost less, which is also healthy. So on the whole, huge fan. And if this is how unreliable works in the future, I'm here for it. You get skis for free now, which is cool. You now have another super secret special rule. I mean, yay. There aren't too many situations where you'd really want skis per se. If you need to do run orders through snowy terrain, that's one thing. But honestly, how many boards is that going to happen on, right? Realistically, you're not going to see it all that often. Two, maybe three at a given tournament. But on the whole, very possibly even less than that. So, hey, nice to have, not strictly necessary. They're also, I mean, they have easy tough fighter access, which is fine. Paying the extra +1 point when you want to on units in order to make them tough fighters is great, except that close combat is not nearly as common anymore. The +1 to hit, of course, from trained huntsmen is fantastic because now we have a whole lot less hit modifiers in general. We're starting at 4s. Now we're going down to 3s effectively, as long as we're, still getting that +1 to hit from an ambush, and possibly down to 2s if we're at point blank range. So basically, stunt assaults when you're already on ambush would be pretty sick. I mean, on the whole, again, it makes you a little more reliable, which is fantastic. These are arguably the best skirmishers in the game now. I would have definitely placed them behind the United States, possibly behind Great Britain in second edition. In third edition, I don't know. They might be better now because the advance into ambush, that way you can be making ground and then ignoring the hit modifier penalty because you're doing an ambush order, which becomes a fire instead of an ambush order when resolving it, instead of an advance order when you resolve it. And then on top of that, an extra +1 for ambush. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, that's better than anybody else is going to get. So they might be some of the best skirmishers in the game now, which is great. And then they still get access to engineers. They still get access to flamers. The engineers they didn't really have in second edition, right? Now they do. Now they get flamethrowers embedded into infantry sections, which is fantastic. I don't know that this is necessarily worth it, both because, again, like your army does a specific style of fighting, which is stay at range, keep them back, kind of wood elves from Warhammer Fantasy or like Eldar from Warhammer 40K. It's that kind of strategy. Rangers of Gondor for Middle Earth. Whatever game it is that you play, they kind of lean into that one. So getting within 6 inches, I don't know that that's necessarily a good idea, personally. But I mean, hey, it's always nice to have options, right? And if you like engineers and you like using flamethrowers, and you haven't collected Finland yet, then hey, good news. In third edition, you can do this. I mean, I've actually run into several people who are like, yeah, I used to play Hungary. Now I just put my Hungarian models on the table and I say this is proxy Finland, right? Because they're like all of the stuff that I used to use, Sans the Nimrod, I can use with Finland. So here we are. I guess, if I want to play the old way I used to play with Hungary, I'm going to play it instead with Finland. So there's that. So what changes would I make? Well, so for starters, I would add, and okay, this is going to be tricky to say. I have been working on this all week, and I don't know how this is going to go. The Svuoheluskunta infantry. And if you speak Finnish, by the way, I am so sorry. Okay, please do let me know how to pronounce it down below because I tried listening to somebody online and I am not very good at this. Okay, so we're gonna try it. But these represented kind of territorial defense forces. Okay, they were relatively quickly levied. They were often comprised of very, very young people or very, very old people. People who had fought way earlier. And so because of that, you got a wide range of stuff. So I would make them inexperienced with green to reflect this, which is typically how we do units like this, home guard style stuff, Volksgrenadier style stuff. And then I'd allow them to add tough fighters for +1 point per man. This is kind of a staple of the Finns, and I like the fact that they can do that. And makes it kind of a dicey thing to try to charge into even an inexperienced section if you know that they've got tough fighters. And then I would also allow you, when you take these, to take an additional medic in platoons where your mandatory slots are filled by these territorial forces. And the reason why is because a lot of these territorial forces had extensive field medic training. And so I think it'd be kind of awesome because medics aren't heavily used in the game, and I don't think it's going to particularly break anything for you to do this way, but also because Finland just relies on infantry so much. when they're not running 12 comms and letzes, obviously. When they're relying on their infantry so much, it's nice to just have an additional 6+ save, if you can. And then after that, we're going to add the, I would recommend adding the Landsverk L182 armored car. They got the version that had either the light AT gun, or they then retrofitted them sometimes to put an AT rifle on board, interestingly enough. It comes with a coaxial machine gun, and then, you throw on a forward-facing machine gun. We've talked about the Landsverk L182 before in previous videos. But I would add that in. It's a Swedish made. It wasn't heavily used, but they did have them. They used them in the Winter War as one of their more common reconnaissance vehicles. By the Continuation War, they were already kind of in the place of transitioning those out. And then when they ended up buying a bunch of German weapons after that, they pretty much phased them out entirely. But again, we don't have very good armored car options here. We're working with BA-10s and 20s that are not particularly great. So I think adding in just another option isn't a horrible idea. I honestly love that unreliable has been made a points reduction. I think as a percentage reduction instead of a straight flat reduction, I think this is fantastic. I would keep that. And then I would consider also adding other inexperienced units, team weapons and supports, because again, even though they did do extensive training for people, so that way, even when they were levying troops, they already had some military knowledge. Like there were some that were 17-year-olds and they were being thrown into support style roles. And so I don't know how much training people got with mortars. I don't know how much training people got with 30 caliber machine guns, but I imagine that's the kind of thing that you could tell a child, hey, follow the instructions of what what the guy on the radio tells you to do and drop a grenade in here. Point this in the direction where it's been told to post and make sure that you're not shooting at any of us, right? Like, these are the kinds of positions you can put relatively green troops in, and you can still expect them to perform relatively admirably, and I imagine that's where a lot of these younger guys were. So I would like to represent this idea of we're drafting guys who are very, very young to come on in and help us out with manpower issues, and the way that you can easily do that to represent that in the game is with inexperienced units. Honestly, though, this is typically the part of the video where I talk about, new special rules and replacing the minor nation special rules that we've seen so far with ones that are a little more flavorful and fun. But honestly, as I've mentioned before, like these are all really great. I think I'd just keep all three of these. These are really good. It's thematic, it's flavorful, it's actually useful, it encourages tactical play. It is not a simple point and click sort of thing. All of this is really good. I love it. And so on the whole, that's Finland. I think Finland is a really, really well poised nation in both second edition and third edition. It's arguably better in third edition because of the fact that you can take more of the things you really love, and the platoon structure is not too prohibitive in terms of the things that you would still want to be able to pick up. On the whole, I think you can do really well with Finland, even post errata, right? Where some of the stuff has been toned down a bit. Honestly, post errata, I think all we have now is just more options. You may not take quite as many Komsomletses, you may not do quite as many of those spams, but you might even consider taking some veteran unreliable tanks now, because pins don't matter nearly as much for hitting difficulties in third edition as they did in second. And they cost a little bit less, so you can kind of afford to field them. And hey, they're still veterans. So again, people have to do they have to be able to actually penetrate in order to actually do pins in the first place. So if you want to have unreliable on a vehicle, it's actually not half horrible having it on a veteran vehicle, because those pins might not come up at all, which is quite nice. So if you haven't picked up Finland yet, my personal recommendation, having only played admittedly like a handful of games with them, I'd say try it. It feels different, it feels interesting. It is very unique as an army. It has a very unique flavor of its own, and I love that. Is there anything that I missed? Anything that I left out? Stuff that I should be covering that you think is absolutely essential for a consideration of Finland? Have you had really good experiences with Finnish units that I have not particularly enjoyed? Are the Jakarta better than I thought that they were? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.